about inflation is it creates this infinite um, inflation loop. So hey, what's up, everybody? It's your boy Juju, and welcome back to the 1% of Juju podcast, where we teach you the practical steps to live your life like the 1%. We're back at it again with another banger. Really excited to be back. As always, asking for your support, asking for your help. Please go ahead, like the video. If you're on YouTube, if you're listening to it, go ahead, give us a rating. Those things help tremendously. And we're still working. Obviously, we're not on social media at the moment. I just had a meeting today with my team, and the things that they're working on is absolutely amazing. The logo is going to change. We're doing a little revamp of our social when we come back. So really exciting things coming up. Obviously, I pride myself on quality and things of that nature. So trying to better the content obviously, but also the quality of the visual and everything like that. Everything is so competitive nowadays, right? And I want to be the best in every area. So working on becoming better. I'm not there yet, but trust me, we're on the way. So I appreciate your support. If you're listening to this, you mean the world to me. So go ahead, click the subscribe button, do all the rest of these things. Go ahead, subscribe to us on YouTube. We're on the way. We're trying to reach 1,000 subscribers. So go ahead, join us as part of that journey, and help us out. With the topic for today, inflation. We're going to talk about it. We're going to get into it, right? Like we hear it every day. Gas prices are rising, home prices are rising, salaries aren't really going up like that. So a lot of people, like, especially if you're a young person, you're kind of starting your career, or you're a couple years into your career and you're expected, you were saving for maybe like your first home and things like that, and it just seems like things are running away from you, and you're getting left behind. So we're going to speak about it today. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, and really understand what this whole thing really is, and understand how to maneuver it and live in a world of crazy inflation. So and we're going to talk about, is it really that bad? Is it that bad of a thing? And I mean, I don't love inflation, but at the same time, I think that there's never that perspective of like, what could there be any good in this whole idea of inflation? And just because it's not a topic that's necessarily touched on a whole lot. We're going to talk about couple questions that we're going to answer today are, why do people keep talking about it so much? And how can you take advantage of it? Are there areas where you can take advantage, or who is it really benefiting to have inflation? What causes it? Things of that nature, right? So the definition of inflation, let's start there. Maybe you have no idea what I'm even talking about. But the definition of inflation. Inflation refers to a general progressive increase in prices of goods and services in an economy. When the general price level rises, each unit of currency buys fewer goods and services. Consequently, inflation corresponds to the reduction in purchasing power of money. As you can see, right, it sounds pretty negative at this point. If I were to put it like this, is a dictionary definition. I believe it was Investopedia, or maybe it was Webster. But this definition, really, what if we were to put it in our own words, it's the fact that like if you have a certain amount of money, and you were able to afford something in the future, as the price of that item or good goes up. Let's say if you look at a carton of milk, well, in general stores it's $2. It's not necessarily referring to one store deciding like, well, now we can charge $2.50 because our milk is better. It's the price of milk or at all the stores together now becoming $2.50 because the cost of, I don't know, transporting it, everything that happens in the supply chain of getting the milk from the cow to the actual store, right? All those prices have increased, and we're going to dive a little deeper into those as we get into this episode. But that's what inflation refers to. According to Bloomberg, a Bloomberg article that I'm going to link. I know I always say that, but now I keep track of them because usually I do research and I look stuff up and like I mention them, but then I don't keep track of like where I'm doing research. But now I kept track of all my sources, so y'all getting the true raw stuff. Check out the description. But according to a Bloomberg article, inflation hit a 39-year high of 7% in January of 2022. So once again, sounds pretty bad, right? It's like, oh my goodness, 7% inflation. That doesn't sound great. And what that means is that, let's say you went to the grocery store last year and you bought, a whole bunch of items. Your whole card costs you $100. Well, now if you were to go to the grocery store this year and get the exact same items, it would cost you $107 for that exact same basket, right? Like the exact same things and maybe even less or whatnot. It would cost you a little bit more, and that may not sound that bad, right? Like you might be like, okay, well, why are people panicking? Like if you're spending $7 more, like that's not that bad. But if you think about that year over year and on all items, like, right, you think about the price of a car or a house, all of those things, you toss 7%, and housing obviously has increased more than that, but you think about all these items and you start adding that up and think about everything you go out and buy on a day-to-day basis. I'm talking a lot with my hands here if you're seeing me on YouTube, but add all of those things up that you're seeing. I was thinking about recently, there used to be a parking lot near my work that I used to park in, and it used to be $15. Now it's $25. So it's all those things. Think about all the areas where you spend money at. They're all increasing in price. When you add all those up, your dollar that you're working for is obviously not going as far for you. And that's what it is. So there's three main causes for inflation, and I'm going to link an Investopedia. Investopedia, I really like it because when I was learning about finances, like before I became a financial advisor even, I used to go on there and they really sort of like dumb things down to a point where you can understand with having very minimal background on finances, and that's where I really got started. So really increased, I wouldn't say that it's the most reputable source or whatnot, but very great to get some basic level understanding of some of these core concepts. So three main causes, three factors to inflation. Number one, production cost. So price of materials increases, right? So one big reason that the housing market has exploded, well, the price of developing new homes has increased, right? So let's say the developers that were increasing home, like things like lumber, the wood, all of those things, all those prices have gone up. So now it's more expensive for people to actually go out and try to build a home. Like all of that has increased. Price of oil is more expensive. That's what making these gas prices increase, right? Because it's a little bit more scarce. Production costs also refers to wages, right? Let's say the minimum wage increases, the price of the service will increase. Well, let's say you're at a restaurant, right? And the minimum wage for the waitress increases. Well, now in order to cover their bottom line, the restaurant owner might increase the item, and I'm not going to get political here, but it might increase the item of let's say a burger on the menu a little bit in order to cover their costs. Innovation, like things of that nature. People are creating new things to create better processes and all of those things in order to decrease to find a way, and they're funding this, by increasing costs and things of that nature. I wanted to share a story here. Like I work in tech and I always hear about these companies spending crazy amounts of money on all these different softwares. They're spending hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars on these softwares. And why is that? Like who pays for that? And I'm thinking about like, well, the price of everything that they sell normally, all their services, if you think about the banks and all of that, fees are creeping up and all of that, a commission that they normally take out, all of that, you're paying for it one way or another. So that's one thing. Number two is demand, right? Supply and demand rules says that the more there's like supply is the amount of people selling something, right? So let's say an example is if you're selling CDs right now or CD players, you're probably not going to be able to charge very much because there's not that much demand for it, right? Like everyone's just has Apple Music or Spotify, and they just, on their phone they can pop whatever music that they want to listen to. Um, but if there's a high level of demand and a very low level of supply for something like houses right now, right? There's a lot of people wanting to buy homes, and there's not a lot of people looking to sell their home. That creates the people that are selling their home, they have the leverage, right? There's a lot of houses that are there. There's not a lot of houses that are there to buy. So this person that like, oh, you five people want my house. Okay, well, who's willing to pay the most for it? And that's what drives these prices up. And the last factor is fiscal policy. So the government deciding to change rules, laws, or making certain decisions that impact prices of things, and these can really work hand in hand. So if you think about, we talked about wages earlier, right? So let's say minimum wage laws change. Well, that might cause the inflation I spoke about, right? Because now the person, like the owner of whatever store or shop or business that is paying these employees, that maybe they had to pay them $14 and now they have to pay them $15. Well, that dollar an hour increase, well, that may mean that, like, well, their profit margin is a little lower, or in some instances that the profit really goes away, so they have to increase their price. So some of these policies may have an impact on inflation. Things like decreasing mortgage rates, right? So at the beginning of the pandemic, we saw a lot of the mortgages, the mortgage rates went down significantly. Well, what did that create? It created a lot of people that normally maybe couldn't afford their mortgage payment, willing to bid a little bit more on a house because their mortgage would essentially be the same as it would have been before on it with a higher interest rate. So that made the demand in mortgages go up, and the supply in homes didn't necessarily follow suit with it. So those are other things that may impact inflation, or that may lead to to inflation. And lastly, the printing of money. I mean, that's not the only fiscal policy that can impact, but I want to keep it like at a level where you guys can all understand. But like when you hear about, the government has printed money, well, you might think like, oh, well, cool, now there's more money to go around, we can just split it evenly and now we're good. But that makes the value of the actual money go down, like the value of the dollar, since there's more of it, right? It's now it's not worth as much. Like if you think about, there's some of the cars, like I'm into kind of some of these rare luxury cars, and every once in a while they'll start talking about, oh, well, this car, there's only a few of them, there's only 500 of them in the world. Well, that makes that car a lot more expensive because it's so rare versus a Honda Civic that you can find everywhere. If you walk into any Honda dealership, you'll find a Honda Civic, right? So that also has a lot to do with when you print that money in very large quantities, the value of it, because it's not as rare, goes down significantly. So that's purely how it works, right? Like that's nothing, no opinion, nothing. It's just how it works. I want to give you a chance to like digest that, because I know I just kind of threw all of these things at you really fast, but those are the things that have an impact, and that like will cause inflation, that will cause prices to rise, and your money essentially to go down in value, right? We spoke about this in the past. Why invest in the first place? Why throw your money in different places where you're going to go out and take a little bit of risk? Why is that important? Because inflation. But we never really dove into inflation and what it is. And I'll speak about the bad now, the bad side of it, because I wanted to technically I'll give some of the good away as I speak about the bad, but I wanted to to finish this on a positive note, like finish the podcast episode on a positive note, and I didn't want to just leave on the downside. But I think that it's both go hand in hand, and like understanding how they both work is really important. So what is the bad? Well, now I'm lost. But yeah, now what is the bad? So the bad is like it makes it hard to get ahead, right? Because your purchasing power is essentially going down all the time, and it makes saving your money pointless, right? So if you're like a very diligent saver and you're like, you know what, I'm just going to be responsible with my money. Every single time my employer pays me or whatever, I'm just going to put it in my savings account and have it there for a rainy day. Well, it makes that almost pointless because now you might as well have spent it a year ago. Like if you think about like I gave the example of like $100 your basket for $100 at 7% inflation. Well, if you take that $100 and you park it in your bank account and you wait 10 years at 7% inflation every year, well, now that same basket of goods that was worth $100 is now worth $200, like $196 to be exact. So you lost half of your purchasing power. It's just like your $100 is worth half of what is actually, you can buy half of the things that you could have bought before with that same $100. So you may as well have spent $50 of that, back in the day and call it a day, right? So it makes it really hard to get ahead, and that's a really hard thing. Another thing that is really bad about inflation is it creates this infinite inflation loop. So I spoke about the wages, right? So imagine, okay, well, wages go up, therefore an employee has to increase their price, but now prices are higher, so cost of living is higher, right? So now employers need to raise their price, and things are going to happen. Employers need to raise wages again to make it above, livable once again. And it's this infinite loop that just keeps on happening, that just like never stops. And that's why a lot of, not to get into politics, but that's where sometimes politicians come in and try to settle that, often their goal. And that's why people pay so much attention there. Like, and when they try to say that like a politician is bad, they're like, oh my God, look at the inflation rate. It's not, right. A lot of things have that impact, but sometimes you do want to come in and put a little bit of a stop and put a little bit of a settle to that inflation, because otherwise it's like infinite, and like the people can generally, it's not good for a country. You'll hear things like CPI or PPI, which are the consumer price index or producer price index, and that's how countries are scored, and that's how they're ranked and things of that nature. And you never want to have a really bad score in those areas. So a lot of people may come in and try to settle that on every side of the aisle, like no matter what, who you vote for or what you believe. That's usually a goal of theirs, to make the people a little bit better in life, more acceptable for people. So I know that sounded pretty bad, and that sounds like there's almost like no solution, because you're like listening to this and you're like, okay, well, there couldn't be any good to that. But I'm 1% Juju. I'm the bearer of good news. Like I just make it happen. So how can you take advantage of it? We're going to talk about the good first, right? And then we're going to dive a little deeper on like how specifically you can take advantage of it. But the good is, like, think about why you want to buy a house, right? Like why is it that so many people want to get their butts into a property? Like it's because they increase in value, right? It's because you're like, well, I'm going to put my money somewhere and I'm going to pay this mortgage off, and ideally the property has increased in value, and then I come out and I paid, let's say, I bought it for $200K. I maybe paid $250K with interest over time, and then now it's worth $500K, whatever it is. And that's a good thing, right? So that's why you want to buy a property as well. And you're seeing all these people, making money with real estate, and you're like, well, I want a piece of the pie. Well, those are things that are due to inflation, right? The price of a good going up with time. So you are also wanting to be the beneficiary. So that's why sometimes, like, when people like try to speak so poorly about like inflation, I'm like, everyone wants inflation. People don't want, their stocks and their goods. Like the reason, Apple stock may go up or whatever is because more people are buying it and they're selling it for more or whatever it might be, right? And they're coming up with new things and innovating and things of that nature. So those things making prices go up. So we all taking part, like, we all want inflation to some extent. We just don't want it in areas where it affects us negatively. So if you're uh, if you're an avid new iPhone buyer, you might not like inflation because your iPhone costs you more every single year. If you're an Apple stockholder, well, then you'll really like inflation because your Apple stock is going over. So it's about what side of this equation are you on, and that's one thing that is really good about inflation. Think about your salary, right? Look up whatever you're doing for a living or whatever your profession is. Look up what your salary was for your profession, or look up the minimum wage and things of that nature, what it was 50 years ago. Now, it maybe hasn't kept up with inflation specifically, but it's still a whole lot more than what it used to be. That's part of inflation, right? Like the fact that you can basically get a raise without you having to do anything special, or have a promotion and things of that nature. Those are things that come with inflation. So if you're a business owner or a side hustle, for example, the barrier of entry is a little higher. I think about myself when I started my business. I mean, those are public records, like you guys can see it on my website, but some of my service vary anywhere from $50 to $250, and I'm probably really cheap for what what a lot of people charge for financial consulting or for business consulting or whatever that might be. But it's probably a whole lot more than someone would have been able to charge for a similar service, you know, couple years ago or 20 years ago. For the exact same service, people probably would have had to charge like $2 or things like that. And I'm able to come in as a young business owner, and be like, well, I want to prove myself to you and show you that like I'm worthy and my services are worthy, and I'm able to charge you a little bit less, and still get a decent amount of money. Or even if you're on the higher tier, right? Like I see some of these conferences and courses that are being sold, which I'm personally not a fan of. I would never recommend you take one, but people are making good money, and I respect. Uh, Respect is a loose term, but I respect the hustle to some extent. Um, but they're charging like 20, 25 grand for a course. You think that people were able to charge 20 grand for a course 50 years ago? No. So you have the ability to come in, run your business, and make decent money, and charge whatever you want. So those are the good things about inflation, right? Like if you're taking advantage of it. Well, obviously, if you're wanting to buy a course now, you're like, oh, well, now it's costing me 20 grand. Well, back in the day, the same course would have cost me like $50. But if you're on the right side of things, it can help you out. So once again, most of your assets increase in value as inflation increases as well. It kind of goes hand in hand. They're tied together. So it's not always a bad thing. So how do you take advantage of it? I think that there's two main ways that you take advantage of it. Number one, invest. Right, like find your way into these insane market in this insane market, and invest in things that are going to be increasing in price. Find those things where you try to find a way to get your way into real estate, because that's at least keeping up with inflation. Find your way into the stock market and all of those things, because they increase in value. Those are things that all are going up because the price of everything is inflating every year. Companies are able to charge more for some items. They're able to innovate. They're able to do certain things. They're able to reinvest, and all of those things, all due to inflation, and that's what makes everything go up. So invest. find what assets perform during times of high inflation, during times of lower inflation, and mitigate your risk, right? Like that's some education that you need to do. Obviously, I'll probably end up speaking more about it because I feel like this episode right here is like a loop from like, okay, speaking about investing and speaking about next thing and next thing and next thing. And now, okay, you're in investing. And now I'm going to speak about investments during inflation, whatever it is. I don't even think what I said makes sense, but you get the point. Find your way into the market and don't just be taken advantage of. Don't just dish out all of the money during these times. Get your own. And join the part number 2. Sorry, the second way to take advantage of this of inflation is to join the hot and in demand trades, right? So join some of those industry. Personally, I work in tech. Guys, learn how to code. You can take courses. I'm fairly sure like you can take like code courses to learn how to code for like, I don't know, like $50. I don't know for a fact, but I can probably try to figure it out for you. Learn how to do those things because they just throw 6-figure salaries at people that know how to do that, right? Like they just toss it. Like I see some of the money that like some of these people at Google or these software engineers are making it because if you guys think that we're somewhere in tech and like it's kind of the bubble has burst, working in it and working like you personally, I'm not like a super technical person. Like I work on the sales side of things, but speaking to some of our customers, they're continuously finding the next thing to innovate and next thing and next thing and next thing. So, the people that are getting into it now, they have a long way to go and a lot to learn. There's a lot more that is coming from like a tech standpoint, and people know that. Like, so they're willing to throw money at these people. So, how about you take advantage of it, right? Like, because they're able to pay a lot more for a developer or a person in IT now than they were able to pay someone in IT 10 or 20 years ago. Inflation. So find yourself in those in-demand trades. Real estate is hot, right? Have you thought about, maybe getting a real estate license? You're like, oh, I want to increase my income and things like that. We're talking about a hot market. Maybe do that. Follow the money and, be in it, be entrenched in where the money is at. Maybe learning another trade, that you can work. Maybe it's working on home. Maybe it's building these homes, being an electrician in these homes, things like that. Follow where the money is at and don't, there's plenty of money out there and your share of the pie is definitely out there. Don't let everybody get rich and without getting your share of the pie. So as this thing is growing and getting up, the barrier of entry gets a little higher, yes, but as soon as you're in, telling you're gonna be like, oh, like I look at the price of my homes and things of that nature and I'm like, oh my goodness, like people are complaining about inflation. I'm kind of loving it, right? But I'm obviously like I understand. I want the good for the greater good, and for myself, like I want I want a home that my family can live on, and it's not great. It's looking really hard to purchase and things of that nature. So the future is definitely looking harder and harder. But at the same time, you'll see that as soon as you're in it, like, working in technology, I'm not really complaining about inflation too much if they keep increasing the salaries in technology and things of that nature. So when you're in it, you don't find yourself complaining just as much or finding it as bad of a thing. So not to say that inflation is this great thing. It needs to be controlled. But there are ways for you to take advantage of it. So I hope this was helpful. If it was, please do share it with someone. Obviously, in these times, especially as we are still revamping our social. And that is the only way that this podcast grows, this platform grows, and in normal times as well. I appreciate your support. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers, guys. Subscribe to the podcast on YouTube. Help us out. We're trying to get there. We're trying to grow the platform, but I always appreciate the help here. Make sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe. Let me know if you disagree, if you agree. I want to know so I can obviously I'm learning as well, right? Like I'm humble enough to admit that like there are some things that I'm learning as well. So, but it helps me tremendously when you do those things, and lets me know, that the time that I'm doing, that I'm spending doing this research and all of this and all of that, is for a reason. But you guys already know, as always, make sure that you're taking the steps today to ensure that you're 1% closer to your goals than you were yesterday. Thanks for joining, everyone. Have a great day.